Welcome, everyone, to today's Ask the Experts webinar, Beyond Borders, Global Perspectives on Digital Media and Children. I am your host, Chris Perry, Executive Director of Children and Screens Institute of Digital Media and Child Development. For our 55th webinar and the last of our 2022 season, we wanted to widen our lens to examine globally the role and impacts of digital media in the lives of children today. Today, we are joined by a remarkable panel of international experts hailing from Australia, Chile, Kenya, India, the UK, and of course, right here in the US, who have come together to discuss the latest trends in youth media habits, research policies, and parenting perspectives from around the world. Together, they will examine both variances and commonalities in the ways that different countries, regions, and cultures experience and respond to the digital world. The essential elements of child development and well-being are universal, but different backgrounds and environments provide unique challenges and opportunities. Over the next 90 minutes, we hope to shed a bit more light on how youth around the world are engaging with technology, what we know about the impacts of digital media on their development and well-being, and what different communities are doing to protect, educate, and advocate for children. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's moderator, Dr. Sonia Livingstone. Sonia is a professor in the Department of Media and Communications at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Among many other roles, Sonia currently directs the Digital Futures Commission with the Five Rights Foundation and the Global Kids Online Project with UNICEF. She is a celebrated author, researcher, policy advisor, and all-around expert on children's rights and safety in the digital age. And we are so excited to have her with us today to lead this discussion. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you so much, Chris. And it's a pleasure to be here and to be here with some really brilliant experts, and to know that there are many people on the call who are fascinated by a topic that certainly fascinates me, which is what is happening to children and young people as they grow up in a digital age all around the world, in very different parts of the world, and in some ways, as you said, having some very different experiences, but in other ways, perhaps there are commonalities. So I love this title of Beyond Borders. Children's lives cross borders and are transnational in many ways. And of course, technology crosses borders in ways that many people find quite scary, because it has connected people, places like never before. And yet, even though we try now to think more and more globally, and my research with the Global Kids Online Network, some people here are part of that, has been trying to do research with children all around the world and in very different parts of the world. Which is challenging in its own right. But today we want to bring to synthesize some of the insights from research and bring them into conversation, to share our knowledge and to recognize some of the ways in which the world and the internet is not borderless. There are many borders. There are borders around language as well as politics. And there are differences among people, and differences are often matters also of inequality around geography and politics and religion and history. So there are many reasons to imagine children's digital lives in different parts of the world will be very different. And yet there are other ways in which perhaps they do all share in a common digital experience. So that's what we'll examine. I'm a firm believer in the importance of research, so I'm glad we have some experts here. I think research can help us slay some myths. It can help us answer the many questions that I know this audience has, and that you'll be posting later. I think some questions have already been posted. I think also research can help us question assumptions. It can help us question what we thought we knew, and challenge us to see the world afresh. So we're going to be talking about very different parts of the world. Keep in mind a kind of comparative perspective. I learned this about India. How is it in Kenya? How is it in America? How is it in Chile? And so forth. We'll try to keep all the different parts of the world in our minds. And perhaps before I turn over to our speakers, I'd just say within the Global Kids Online perspective and that effort to think about children's digital lives globally, we do try very hard to keep thinking about the risks and the opportunities in balance. And I say that because I know parents often kind of come with the risks and the anxieties to the forefront of their mind, but I think when we listen to children's voices, they are very excited by the opportunities. Somehow we need to bring those opportunities and risks together and to recognize children's lives in a holistic way, to kind of recognize the complexity, the diversity, but also the practical reality of their growing up in a digital world. And perhaps we'll also learn from children's experiences. I think there are some on our panel who are committed that adults have something to learn from children, and research can help us with that process too. So we have 5 speakers, and each is asked to speak for around 5 minutes, and they will give you a sense of their research commitment and their research insights. And then we'll come to the Q&A, and I look forward to what it is to discover what's on the mind of everybody here. And as Chris said, we will run, I can't say what time we'll stop at because everyone here is on a different time zone, but we will stop in about an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to start by introducing, I'm going to introduce each of our speakers as they present. So I'll begin with David Kleeman, who is a strategist, analyst, author, speaker, and connector, very good for the digital age, who has led the children's media industry in developing sustainable, child-friendly practices for more than 35 years, and has been committed to looking worldwide for the best practices, originally as president of the American Center for Children and Media, and now a senior vice president of global trends for Dubbit, a strategy and research consultancy and metaverse studio. David might enlighten us about that metaverse in his presentation also. So David, over to you, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia, and thank you to Children and Screens for inviting me to be here. I'm so glad to be with such a great international panel. I am going to share my screen, and I'm going to try to do a juggling act here, which is to present kind of 2 different perspectives in the space of my 5 minutes. We'll see if I can actually get it all done. Where I want to start is with a global look, because we do conduct global research, and then I'm going to go on to look more at North America and Northern Europe and what some of the mega trends are there. Just to let you know, the slide data that I'm going to be presenting today comes from something my company does, Dubbit Trends. We survey 2,000 kids in the US and 1,300 in the UK twice a year, and then also 18 other countries that we visit roughly once a year in ways that are balanced in the national profile and capture the range of kids and families in those countries. We work with 2 to 18 in the US and UK, 2 to 15 in most of the other countries. I'm focusing on 4 countries in the first part of this today from our most recent survey this last fall. And I've chosen those 4 countries in part because the US is always the first adopter of everything. And when I get to the part about the US and North America and Northern Europe, you'll see how that works. France is something of a more traditional media culture, a little bit slower to adopt things for their kids. Parents are a little more restrictive. And Brazil and Malaysia present 2 rather different emerging market perspectives. And I've chosen to focus on 6 to 11-year-olds because it's such a fascinating audience right now. As it says here, 1 foot in preschool, 1 in adolescence. They are free to make their own decisions. You'll see how technology has come into their lives at that age. And they are very eager to be in control of their own media situations. All right, there we go. At that age of looking across these four countries, at that age of 6 to 11, they are migrating from the tablet to the smartphone. The tablet is becoming kind of the baby thing that they used when they were little for educational apps and such. But as soon as they get hold of the smartphone, and you can see that by the age of 11, in some places, 50% of kids have a smartphone. That you see Malaysia and Brazil are at 50%, largely because they are more Android-based countries where it's less expensive to get a phone. US, we're getting very close though to the average age of getting your first smartphone being between say 8 and 10. So that's creeping up very quickly. And the television used to be the rite of passage to get a TV in your own room. No longer. Now it's really getting the smartphone that is the rite of passage, and much more of their television time, video time is spent with the big screen in the living room. We look at just how many brands and stories and things come at kids in the course of a day, and it's just overwhelming. You can see that this is just the number of independent brands that are spontaneously mentioned by the 6 to 11-year-olds. You can see it numbers in the hundreds when you add up all those different things. And what that means is they are constantly faced with this attempt to make sense of a world around them that is just full of different stories, brands, characters trying to get their attention. Increasingly, the brands that are their favorites are coming from the digital world. Here you can see that those that are where the little block is in green background, those are the digital origination brands like Roblox, like YouTube. And it used to be that almost all of this screen would have been blue. It would have been things that came from television. But now we've really made a shift where kids are discovering new things through digital, and their favorite things are in the digital world. They may be on other platforms as well, but they are substantially reflected in the digital world across all these four very different countries. The top apps that they are playing with right now are games, messaging, and social. This is 6 to 11, so remember, a lot of these kids are not supposed to be on most of these platforms, but they are there. They are finding their way there. They will hack a platform to fulfill their needs as they need. And you can see how important it is that they control their media environment, that they are on platforms where they get to choose what they play, where they get to talk to their friends, where they get to communicate. And that became especially important during the pandemic when they really had to turn to digital to connect with their friends. So let me turn now to North America and Northern Europe and look at when you have a culture of plenty, when you have so much media coming at kids, how do they manage it? There are certain problems that they face, challenges that they face, and I want to look at how they deal with those. So this is everything in their life competes with everything else. It's no longer, do I watch this television program or this television program? Do I play this game or this game? It's, do I watch this TV show? Do I play this game? Do I get on communication app with my friends? Do I go out and play? Do I pick up a toy? And that's why the head of Netflix says we compete with Fortnite more than we compete with HBO, and lose to them. So everything competes with everything in kids' lives. Then there's the paradox of choice. This is the head of FX Networks, who says anytime you choose one thing, you are unchoosing everything else. You don't even know whether the thing you chose was the thing you really wanted most, or that would please you most. And that accounts in some ways for the rise of TikTok. That instead of committing to a half-hour television program, young people want to say, if I don't like something, I can go on to the next thing. And that's one of the attractive natures of TikTok. That plus the fact that it's built for the smartphone, which, as I said before, is their key platform of choice. So how do they manage it? They have a purpose for every device. We find in our research, and I should point out that Dubbit is not an academic organization, it's a market organization. So our research is probably going to look a little different in its nature and in its findings from maybe some of the academic research that we'll hear about going on. But in each case, they choose the device for the purpose that they have. So even though they have all these things in front of them, and there are times of day when several of them are on at once. After school, we think of as the Bermuda Triangle of media, because the TV goes on, the smartphone goes on, the games controller may go on. but they really make sense of this by knowing this is where I want to spend my time with video. This is where I want to spend my time with social. This is where I want to play games. The other way we find they manage is what we call emotional scheduling. And this was really surprising to us when we first noticed it through the course of the day. Kids make constant choices through the day of what they are going to be doing, and it's largely based on their emotional state. And then finally, the other way they manage is the ICANN generation. They want to be builders, not just consumers. They don't want to be seen as users, and that accounts for the many platforms that they choose. This story on the right is about a kid who created the entire world from Encanto in Minecraft, and then created a video of the song "We Don't Talk About Bruno" using his iPad and this world that he'd created. That's where I'll stop for now, and I look forward to discussion more, and I'm happy to share these slides.
Thank you very much, David. I hadn't heard of the Bermuda Triangle of media before, but I think that will resonate with many parents who know exactly what that moment is. Yes, and I like the ICANN generation too. So from North America and Europe, particularly, we're going to move to thinking about Latin America. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Patricio Cabello, who's an assistant professor at the Center for Advanced Research in Education in the Institute of Education at the University of Chile. He's also the head of Kids Online Chile, so we've worked a lot together in Global Kids Online. And his research focuses on students and teachers' 21st century skills. I think parents would like to know, people in the audience would like to know what those 21st century skills are, analysing especially the impact of inequalities in developing digital skills and collaborative problem-solving skills in the Latin American context. So, Patricio, over to you.
Thank you, Sonia, and thank you to Children on Screens and all the audience. And I'm very happy to share this contact with all of the panelists. I will talk about some of the findings that we had in Latin America, especially in Chile. I am not going to talk on behalf of the Latin American Network, but I will share some of the results that we have achieved, some of the outcomes of this compared research program that it's been, I don't know, for almost like 7 years that we have been working with our mates from other Latin American countries. So I will give you just a little list, something like that, of some of the main outcomes and some of the things that we are discussing these days. That's a very short introduction, because it's very important for us, for you to know also that we have this Latin American network, that it's kind of part of Global Kids Online, of course. And we have Brazil that has been working with this data from 2012, Chile's 2016 and 2022. We're right now conducting our second version of the Kids Online survey, and also a short, small qualitative research. Also, Costa Rica have conducted this, and they are trying to conduct a second wave to Uruguay, that it's also are conducting. They have just finished the field work of this new version, and Argentina that already did something in 2016, and now it's preparing for 2023. So this is the scope of all the countries that we have been working with, and I will tell you some things that are quite common between us. And of course, I have the bias of I talk a little bit more about Chile, of course. One of the most important things, I tried to organize this into two topics: households and individuals, and school context. And that's important, the thing about school context, because now in our new wave, our new version of the Kids Online, now we have we went to schools to conduct the survey. This is originally a household questionnaire where children were interviewed with a very long and very complex questionnaire about their digital experiences, and also what their parents think and what they feel about their uses of digital media. What we found already is that we have a digital underclass. What we call this digital underclass is children that are having being connected mostly through cell phones at home. That means that the data is like more than 50% in the region do that. In Chile, it's 53%. Other countries a little bit more. Some of them are a little bit less, but it's around 50% of them are using only cell phones at home, where they don't have all the affordances of a mobile device, and of course, it is not very suitable for learning and for example, using for typing, and they have a very scarce memory and so on. Other thing that we found that it's very important, the thing about digital skills for children and parents and teachers, and that digital skills are, of course, not fairly distributed, are actually under the influence, of course, of the inequalities of the region. The role of parental and teachers mediation, this is something that's very important for us, and there is like this two main types of mediation, active versus restrictive mediation, and we found that active mediation is quite more effective for give more opportunities to children, and restrictive mediation has not been very effective to avoid risks. We have also a ladder of participation in digital society, which is something that Global Kids Online have been working did by Sonia. Which is how we have been comparing, you know, how we from country to country have like the same ladder, you know. Some of the digital practices are very usual at the bottom, and creative practices, for example, are very scarce in the high end. And lack of information for parents is something that we have found also, how mediation sometimes is based on myths or inaccurate information, which is very common. In the school context, we have lack of digital teachers' digital skills and poor training. In Chile, for example, 35% of teachers are not trained. Sorry, this is a mistake. Are not trained about digital technologies at initial education. We have this very important difference between rural and urban reality. We have other things that we have found that we are just starting to understand more, how cyberbullying, for example, works, and how cyberbullying even can be related, for example, to inequalities, to differences between genders, for example, and also how schools, for example, are getting involved in this, and this is part of our current agenda. I think my 5 minutes went, so I will stop here, but I will be happy to answer any of your questions or comments afterwards.
Thank you very much. And I like that you gave a little insight into some of the kind of behind the scenes of how one does this research, how we get hold of this kind of information about children's lives in different parts of the world, and also emphasizing that question. We're not just looking at differences across countries, but there are also big differences within countries. And so your point about the digital underclass and also the urban-rural difference, I think, will resonate in many parts of the world. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn now to Amanda Third, talking, well, she's talking, I'm told, from the Asia Pacific region, though I know she's sitting in Australia right now in the middle of the night. And so Dr. Amanda Third is a professorial research fellow at the Institute for Culture and Society, and she's co-director of the Young and Resilient Research Centre at Western Sydney University and a faculty associate at the Berkman Klein Centre for Internet and Society at Harvard University. And she has led child-centred projects to understand children's experiences of the digital age in over 70 countries, working with lots of different partners. And I think she'll give us a sense of what it is that children have told her.
Thank you, Sonia. And I'm very, very honoured to be speaking alongside the other panelists this morning. There's indeed some very esteemed colleagues, and I want to start by acknowledging that actually some of the work that we have done in those 79 countries has been led in countries around the world by some of the people on this call. So a big shout out to them. So I'm going to focus this morning on Southeast Asia and the Pacific region, but I did just want to flag that we have gathered qualitative data, so really deep dive data that in workshops with children around the world, and I'll hone in on the Asia Pacific this morning, but recently I've had the pleasure of leading 3 large projects in the region, and so that's what I'll draw on today. And I think the first thing that I would point out is just the incredible diversity of our region, as Sonia's sort of already begun to gesture. We have children who are accessing the internet via a mobile phone under a coconut tree with lots of other children surrounding them. They're watching YouTube videos together, right through to the fortunate child who has ready access to their technology. But I think, regardless of the diversity of children's experiences across the region, what we have also ascertained is that there are really a lot of commonalities, and that some of the stereotypes that we have about the differences between low and high income countries don't necessarily apply. So you have children in low income countries with lots of technology, and you also have children in high income countries in the region who are really struggling to get online. And I think that's one of the things that we need to really pay attention to, particularly, access for children across the region is fraught. A lot of children, the biggest barrier that they face is indeed access. And across the region too, primarily children are going online via a mobile phone, and this has consequences for the kinds of quality of experiences that they can have. Many of them are doing that via a shared mobile device. So similar to what Patricia was just saying about in Latin America, they may only have internet access when they're outside school, and using a phone in the family, but a phone that essentially may not belong to them. But even where it does belong to them, they are coming online predominantly via a mobile phone. Like children around the world, they're primarily using digital technologies to communicate, to connect with each other, with their families, and with networks of interest, to share information and express their ideas, and to seek information. And indeed, one of the big challenges we have in the region is children being able to access information that is robust and trustworthy and in a language that children speak. Because of course, for a lot of our part of the world, the majority of the internet is in English, and so language becomes a key barrier. I want to briefly highlight some of the barriers that we're experiencing, or children are experiencing, in the region. Firstly, access to hardware. So the cost of devices and so on is often prohibitive for a lot of children. Many children still face unreliable electricity and data supply, so that really shapes how they can get online, when, and what they can do. Although there are some strong improvements in the region, so there's just been a new underwater cable opened up to the Pacific Islands, which means that more and more children are coming online there. But that itself, now that children have access to digital technology in that part of the world, that's throwing up a whole bunch of new issues, because of course children are coming online in a context where adults haven't got the background with using technology too. Children in our region say very clearly that parental rules, attitudes, and their limited digital literacy skills negatively impact their online experiences. So again, the restrictive kind of dimension of parenting really giving children a sense that they can't do the things that they want to do. So for example, it takes time online to craft the skills to be able to create digital content, and that's very hard it's hard to take that time when your parent is telling you constantly to get off the technology. So they also worry about their own digital literacy skills. The content that they access is predominantly in English and often doesn't serve their needs. And they feel like they that they don't always trust the platforms they engage with, and they don't always feel safe. At the same time, though, that children have really strong aspirations for the internet. They're very excited about coming online, using digital tools and so on. And they're really wanting more support to be able to maximize those opportunities. And I think that's a message that goes to that children around the world are sending. I just want to finish very quickly just to let you know, we do have a joint statement from 4 countries in the region about what they want from their digital world. And I want to highlight just a few little things here, just to sort of give you a flavor of what children are saying. Really, they want these digital experiences to be meaningful, and they want them to be good for their mental health. And they really want trustworthy platforms that will keep their data secure and respect their privacy. They want to be protected from harm and to treat each other from kindness, but a shout out to parents and teachers. They're really calling on those groups to really know about online safety so that they can help children stay online. And they want to be provided with support, guidance and information about how to protect themselves. So there's much more there, and I'll drop a link to this particular report into the chat, but thank you for your time. Back to you, Sonia.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And you really remind me, we often say in kind of public discourse that we want children to be more sensible and kind and reliable and responsible and respectful online, but actually I love that the children say no, they would like the platforms, the content, the environment online to be more trustworthy and respectful and positive for their life experiences. So I think when we think of our anxieties about the digital world, we can't hold the children solely responsible for making things better. It is also down to the sometimes very wealthy companies that provide this digital opportunity. So I'm going to turn now to our 4th speaker, Dr. Manisha Pathak-Shalat, who's going to speak to us from about children in India. So Manisha is a professor of communication and digital platforms and strategies and chair of the Center for Development Management and Communication at MICA in India. And she's leading the India component of the Global Kids Online Study. So I have worked with her, and I see she's also doing a collaborative study with the Young and Resilient Research Centre of Western Sydney University. So I think she must be working with Amanda. Manisha, we look forward to hearing about Indian Kids Online. Thank you.
I just want to start with the disclaimer that, I have used certain pictures in my presentation, and these are not the actual children that I'm talking about. So they have posed for this, and you will realize that it's so difficult to represent a country like India in 5 minutes. So there are bound to be some shortcuts, and though I want to break the stereotypes, I just want to say that there's no intention to create any stereotypes here, but these are the shortcuts that I had to take in my presentation. So what happens in India is that we have very contradictory perception of what digital media are all about. So in one way, we parents and government and teachers, we all think that digital media are a route to, a coveted degree, a well-paying job, and also nation building. And on the other side, there is this discourse that they are the root cause of everything that is evil. So all the risks, crimes, risky relationships, health issues, all that like come to children through digital media. And you see these contradictions also reflected in government policy. So for example, we have a big initiative called Digital India, but at the same time, we banned TikTok in India, and there was a huge panic around PUBG and Blue Whale. So, but despite these contradictions, more and more people in India have now got access to digital media thanks to the low-cost mobile data charges provided by private service delivery organization. Also, there is more vernacular content online. Pandemic has also played a role. So there is definitely more access to digital media. But there is a huge intra-country diversity, which I want to just bring forward very briefly. Again, there are lots of similarity also, despite, all these differences of caste, class, gender, religion, urban, rural. Also, individual interest of children also matter a lot, which we sometimes forget. So within all these differences and influences, a lot of different kind of digital media uses and skills emerge in India. So I'm just representing these quickly through 5 profiles. So here is Ahana, and she is active on YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, Discord. She blogs once in a while, and digital media devices and phone are everyday part of her life, very integral part. She has a very social life. She posts pictures about her foreign trips and her activities with friends on Instagram. And she also creates her own YouTube dance videos. She regularly keeps in touch with her long-distance boyfriend through social media and phone. And in her circle, like dating apps like Bumble and Hinge is quite common. She has access to all the OTT platforms, the global OTT platforms, and her media diet is a mix of Indian and global on all these platforms and also Spotify. And she is quite technology dependent in her day-to-day tasks. So this is one kind of Indian youth that we have. Next, we have Farooq, who is 14. For Farooq, they have a shared desktop at home, and he's promised a laptop when he enters college, and if he scores really good marks in his school exams. So his digital media time is quite closely monitored by his parents, which he sometimes resents, but also in a way accepts, as something that is good for him. So he has limited digital media time on which he usually watches YouTube videos and watches like replays of, say, cricket match or Bollywood songs. And he's part of many WhatsApp groups like friends group, coaching class friends group, building friends group, dad side family, mom side family. So it's very much a part of his daily media diet. Then we have Nimrit, who is 17. And Nimrit has several restrictions on who she can see, how she should interact, and how much time she should spend on social media, basically. And that means that don't spend any time on social media and don't post anything about yourself, especially don't post any pictures. And that's why she has a Facebook account using a pseudonym and picture of a famous Bollywood star. But she does have a boyfriend who has given her secretly a phone, and that is only for, talking to the boyfriend and sending messages to him. And he keeps a close tab on, what else she does on this phone. So she usually likes to, whenever she gets time, on the pretext of meeting friends for homework, she has a shared access to other people's Facebook accounts and YouTube videos, and she makes like good use of that time. And then we have Suman, who lives in a tribal village of Madhya Pradesh. And Suman has benefited by a program in which government and a non-profit are partners. And she is part of this non-profit squad, who is trained to use mobile phones to keep a tab on environment conservation in the areas. So she takes pictures and videos of like illegal, environment poaching activities, tree felling. She keeps a tab of like how is the tree population compared to what it was. She shares these photos and videos in her WhatsApp network through these NGOs. And because the non-profit has given her the smartphone, though she cannot read or write, she makes use of a lot of audio and video content. Yes, Sonia. And the last one is this boy in a Mumbai slum who does not own a smartphone, and he helps, on a tea stall. And here is where he comes in contact with a lot of older boys, and these are his source of everything that is available online. So he knows where porn is available. He knows, how these older boys get into romantic relationships online. He also hangs out with these boys, in the community. There is a breakdance group, and people get together, young boys to practice breakdance. And here he is watching global videos of breakdance, community with them. And so YouTube is like the maximum, used platform for him, but he does have a Facebook profile again that he has started by faking his birth date. He's only 10, but his older friends help him do all these things. So very briefly, I'm presenting, the variety of internet and digital media use that we find in India. And that's why we always say that when we have a policy or program on media literacy in India, we should make it like an Indian sari, which can be draped around different bodies and, different occasions, and not like a very tightly tailored Western suit. So thank you. And I think we'll have more time during the discussion. Thank you.
We absolutely will have time in the discussion, and I love your metaphor of the sari, which I shall think more about. But especially, I love the way, Manisha, you show us how children's and young people's media use is embedded in their life context, and their life contexts are very diverse. So they face different circumstances, and that gives a different purpose and a different need for their media use, which we really need to keep in mind when we say children or young people as a vast generality. So I'm going to turn now to our fifth speaker, and I appreciate everyone's efforts in keeping up with the pace. And it's a great pleasure to introduce Caleb Ndaka, who is co-founder of Kids Comp Camp. I'm sure he'll tell us about that, a Kenyan-based digital literacy initiative that seeks to empower children and parents in rural and underserved communities in Africa with the digital skills that they need to thrive. And he's also a research associate at London School of Economics, where I am and where he and I first met. Maybe we first met on social media, actually, but I can't quite recall. Anyway, Caleb, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And let me begin by apologizing that my connection is not very stable, and so I will have to forgo my slides and just present, which is just a true reflection of what children here in Kenya go through. In the last 30 minutes, I've just had 2 power outrages. So I'll just proceed without my slides, and I hope that I'm audible and I am clear. Sonia?
It's all good. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So let me begin by introducing the work that I do. I run Kids Comp Camp, which is an initiative to help both children and parents in rural and underserved communities to catch up with the current digital-driven society. And the way we do our work is through a computer camp model, We move from village to village, from town to town, just trying to ensure that no child, especially those in rural area, is left behind by the current digital-driven society. And it's such a big pleasure for me to be here tonight. So let me begin by discussing the major trends when it comes to digital media. There are two big platforms when it comes to children and parents. And those two big platforms, first we have TikTok, and then we have WhatsApp. Now, TikTok came into the market like almost like the last platform, but it has grown so fast. It's the fastest growing platform among children and young people. And the reason for that is it has proved to be very easy to create content and share that content both in the platform, across other social media platforms, and as well as offline. One particular feature about TikTok, which has made it to be very famous, it has become to what we call the viral platform, because it's so easy to share content online and offline. It's very important at this particular point to mention that 70% of Kenyans live in rural areas, and most of them, they are offline. But TikTok, and especially through this one particular feature, which is called TikTok Challenge, has been able to bridge that gap of offline and online, because fewer kids who have devices are able to see what is happening on online TikTok challenges, and they're able to replicate that offline. And so TikTok has grown very fast because it has been able to bridge that online and offline divide, but also it's been able to travel across rural and urban places. Just the other day, I attended a school function, and I saw parents and students dancing to a TikTok challenge, which is all across. Now, the second platform is WhatsApp, and WhatsApp has grown so fast to more than just being a digital platform, to actually being like a social infrastructure. There's a joke in Kenya that nothing happens without a WhatsApp group. And the reason for that is because WhatsApp has become embedded into everyday use, from rural to urban areas. It's almost a de facto an everyday platform. And so as you look at many other uses of digital media, for example, kids learning how to play games, older kids learning how to bet, it's all embedded on WhatsApp, which becomes almost like an infrastructure. And so what are the main concerns of children and parents? Let me begin with the parents. Parents in Kenya are concerned about three big things. First is safety of their kids. And when I say safety, I mean like physical safety. There's been an increase in number of kidnapping cases. And most of those kidnapping cases have a way of either children being groomed on WhatsApp or on TikTok and being in very unsafe hands. So safety, like physical safety, is one of the key concerns of the parents. The other one is values and culture. In Kenya, most of us, we are very religious, we have these conservative values. And so there's a perception among most parents that digital media and technology is a thing of the West. And this thing of the West does not really respect our African traditional values. And so parents increasingly are getting concerned into access to technology and access to digital media means being exposed to what I may put in quotes like these Western values, which many a time are represented by things like pornography and cyberbullying and so on and so forth. The last but not the least is well-being of their kids. And with this, and I guess this also comes with the perception which is coming from the media is it's just the panic around screen time is leading to addiction, or screen time is leading kids to be lazy because they're not working in the firms. They're now just sitting with their devices. And so they're not being being productive. But then, as I finish up, what can we learn from this trend and from this perception of parents? And the first first lesson that I think we can learn is, and it's well captured by an African proverb which says, it takes a village to raise a child. Now, that was a proverb which was used many a time in the offline versions, but even in the current digital-driven society, we still find it's very true. The other day, I met a group of parents. They formed this local community of practice, and they are sharing ways and means they can keep their kids safe online. And so access to a reliable and accessible community of practice among parents is one of the very insightful things that parents can leverage on and learn from each other. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the panel and contributing further on that.
Thank you so much, Caleb, and thank you to everyone for sticking to time. And I'm feeling slightly dizzy in having been to so many parts of the world right now, but also actually very excited. And I would also like to thank everyone for putting their questions into the Q&A, because we now have time for questions, and I want to draw our panelists together in offering some insights. I might begin by observing that lots of the questions that have come in are about concerns about risk, the risks that the digital world poses to children, and the worries that adults, parents, responsible authorities have about that. And I wonder, perhaps I might, I'm going to pick on certain people, but perhaps I might start with Amanda and say something about, Amanda, how do you think about that balance between the opportunities, some of which Caleb has elaborated, also David, others, but also that real sense of concern about the threat? How should we focus our attention?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think actually the challenge that every parent faces, obviously. And I think there are a few key things to keep in mind here. And a lot of this comes out of the Global Kids Online research that Sonia and Patricio and others have been doing, Manisha. But, and that is that the relationship between risk and opportunity or benefit online for children is not straightforward. And it's very important for us to know what the risks are as parents, and to really have a sense of the things that we can do to protect our children, but also to be mindful to keep our concerns in check, because there are many benefits for children to access online. And also I think that, access, obviously the more time a child spends online, the more risks they are likely to encounter. But at the same time, the more time they spend online, the more skills they develop, and the more kind of protective strategies they can develop. So it's a very complex equation, and I think as parents we have to be staying very close to our children's digital media practices. That doesn't mean sitting down with them every time they use the media. It certainly doesn't mean knowing everything there is to know about being online, but it means having an openness to learning with your child, and to having regular conversations with your child in order that you can actively mitigate some of those risks. But I think, as Caleb said very beautifully when he spoke, it does take a whole village to raise a child online, and of course it's not enough for parents and children themselves to bear the responsibility for keeping children online. We do need to call for environments that prioritize the safety and the opportunities for our children. And so I think the other thing that we can do as parents is write letters, make phone calls, call for that change as parents, demand it as a consumer. So those are some of the things that I think we should keep in mind. But I think the other thing is I would reassure parents on this call that when you're being a good parent and you're watching your child, setting examples, you're modeling good technology behaviors yourself, these are all wonderful things that you can do, and things that actually we know from the research make a difference to your child.
I think that's very encouraging, because I think people would like to know what are the kind of practical things that they can do and that have been shown to make a difference, and how can they move away from some of those kind of very restrictive parenting approaches into something we might call more kind of positive parenting. So I'd like to come to David, and I'm kind of remembering the fabulous amount of choice that, as you said, children are inundated with in terms of many brands. How do you think about that balance of risks and opportunities? Because essentially you describe lots of opportunities, but in there are risks, and I don't know how those figure in your world. And especially I'm just looking at one of the questions that came in, which is, whatever we provide for children, what do we do when some children get drawn into those more negative places?
I think in terms of the balance of risk and opportunity, I'm going to come at it from very quickly from three different perspectives. And all three of those have a nod in them to the fact that governments worldwide, regulators worldwide, are really looking at the digital world right now and are ready to step in and regulate. Here in the U.S., we are building models based on the British age-appropriate design code. We are we're at a moment right now where we get one shot at the sort of future of media for young people. And if we don't make it safe, if we don't protect privacy, they will step in very quickly. So a nod to them. But the three areas, one is we really need media literacy education in the earliest stages. It's sort of ridiculous now that so many countries have not acknowledged that we teach children how to read in print, how to read text, but we still don't acknowledge that screens and other forms of media come to them, are so immersive in their day that we really need to teach that from the beginning. From the perspective of the industry, I am encouraged by some small developments. For example, Roblox, one of the biggest platforms for kids right now, has a vice president of civility. They have someone whose job it is to come at it from two different directions. One is working with the people who make the games for the platform and say, we're going to help you learn how to make games that encourage people to be good to each other, that don't create situations where the obvious choice or the preferable choice is to be bad to each other. And the other perspective they come at it from is the users. How do we teach kids to be good users of the platform, good digital citizens? And then the third side is parents. And I'm going to acknowledge from the beginning that what I'm about to say comes from a real position of privilege. And hearing some of the presentations about how kids access media in other parts of the world, I'm a little anxious about saying this, but during the pandemic, those parents who were privileged enough to be home with their kids and watch what their kids were doing with technology, I think often came to a better understanding of the opportunities that, we've heard a couple of people mention how hard it is for kids to build something when the parent is constantly saying, get off the computer, turn off that thing. When parents saw what their kids were building in Minecraft, when they saw the games that they were creating in Roblox, when they saw some of the ways they were digging into their passions with Google, with YouTube, I think they came to a better understanding and a better conversation with their kids about how to encourage the good and discourage the bad.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So perhaps I can pick up on exactly that point and take it back to Patricio, thinking both of the question of media literacy or digital literacy. What do we want to be teaching children, perhaps also parents. But I'm thinking also, Patricia, of what you said about that kind of ladder of participation and how not all young people have the opportunity to kind of become so creative and to, you know, really express themselves. So what is it? Is it media education, media literacy that can enable young people to do have those creative opportunities that David is talking about?
Of course, from the word media literacy is a very institutional word, I think. It's a word that comes from public policy, from researchers, from schools, from an institutional framework. And I think it's good, and I think it's something that we should address. But we have to address that properly, thinking always, I think, this is my perspective, that most of those digital skills that you need to, for example, create content, even for critical thinking through digital media, are closely related with cultural capital, if you can say so. So and that in cultural capital, or this social capital that some kids have with a more strong, I think, interaction with media technologies. Yeah, what sometimes people call these digital natives, you know, that it's a word to talk about some kids and not all the kids, and sometimes to I don't know, to make a little bit more obscure these inequalities. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly.
You mean
but
something? So you're saying something, I think, about the relative affluence or education also of the parents, and that
it's something that it's there is something that it's in the environment, and also, for example, we found that richer children have children from rich families. They have this ubiquitous access. They can access everywhere. They have mobile phones, but they also have multi-device access. They have computers. They have tablets. They have everything that is in the market. It's not only digital ecology that works on its own. It's merged with the education of parents. Is merged with other things that are different in their culture and in the context that they live. So for developing skills for creative content, for example, we need something more than only digital literacy in this institutional way. We have to face inequalities in how families, for example, are dealing with this, and how they're also parenting in a more active way.
Thank you. And I might take the question also to Manisha. And now that we're on the subject, we're covering a lot of areas quite fast. But I think this question of digital literacy, or what education can do to support a richer, deeper, more beneficial engagement with digital technologies. I mean, Manisha, can you maybe give us a little sense of, is there media literacy education for children in India, and what does it focus on? What should it focus on, perhaps?
Yes, so there is media literacy education in India, but it's again uneven. So it depends on, you know, which state you are in, whether you are in urban area, which kind of school you go to. There are also non-profits who are very actively working in the scene. But what I feel that still a lot of media literacy education is protectionist, focusing on how not to face harm or risk. I would like to see more proactive media literacy education where, you know, schools expose children to a lot of joyful and meaningful things that are present online, lots of civic opportunities that are present online. Also, schools closely working with parents, because it's very important that we don't take the pleasure away from kids, you know. So I don't want media literacy education that takes the joy of digital media away from the kids. So I would like to see a close connection between the policy, schools, and parents, you know, and when they listen to children, and then, you know, plan the programs accordingly.
Fantastic, thank you. So I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on the question of media literacy, digital literacy. I know it is many hope that we really can educate young people in ways that will enable them to maximize the opportunities of the digital world. Caleb, I see that you're I mean, you spend a lot of time really trying to encourage children and teach them what they need to know to manage the digital age. Do you feel that media literacy initiatives in Kenya are sufficiently supported and resourced to make that difference, or what would you want to see happen?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the one that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And one of the things that we've been learning from our work here is that, and picking a good example from, from, for example, TikTok and why it has been so effective. It's just the element of anchoring digital literacy into local context. And I'm going to give an example. We have, for example, right now, something called Kikuyu TikTok, Kikuyu is the biggest tribe of Kenya. And what we've seen over the last couple of months is this local comedian or local opinion leaders being able to take, for example, how to use smartphones or how to use computers, and being able to put that into local language, local analogy, and being able to reach as many people as possible, especially young youth and children in young places. We've seen the government investing into devices, but devices in schools are proved not to be the most effective approach, because we have, for example, in Kenya right now, over 1 million devices, yet like 80% of them, they are not being used because teachers are not trained. There's technology phobia among most adults. And so kids are not being given, spaces for them to explore and to learn. And so just this element of being context specific and using local knowledge, local resources has proved to work more effectively than the almost what I call the top-down approach, rather trying to change that to work from the community, give kids spaces, make it fun, interactive, and they'll be able to show their creativity and growth.
It's such that's a very compelling image, really, that there is the provision, there is the resources for the hardware, but not necessarily for the teacher training or the opportunities to consult young people about what they themselves would like. And I think we've seen this through the history of technology, really, that there is often the policymakers get excited about buying the devices, but not about putting in the support. So, David, I think you wanted to come in on what media literacy could or should be doing.
I wanted to bring in a perspective, a very practical perspective about young people teaching themselves about media. And that is that 2.5 years ago, the company I worked for was 60 people, 59 of them in Leeds, and myself in the UK, and myself in Washington, D.C. We are now over 150 people all over the world and from all different cultures, all different economic levels, because what we've discovered is young people, for the platforms we are building for, young people have taught themselves how to make games, how to make experiences, because they wanted to make the things they wanted to play, the things that they and their friends wanted to do. So entirely intrinsically motivated, they've taught themselves to be programmers, to be designers, to be storytellers, and they are now coming into the working world with those skills that they developed because of their own intrinsic motivation.
I very often hear a kind of a debate in this domain between what should education do, what can media literacy do, but also what perhaps can regulation do, or what should the government do more. And there are some questions coming in the Q&A also about what government should be doing to foster a more safe environment to support children online, indeed families. I wonder if, thinking of the different parts of the world here represented, anyone might want to say something about particularly successful policies, successful government initiatives that maybe those in other countries could learn from or be stimulated by. So this is a question to anybody really, but have you seen a successful government initiative, whether it's regulation or education or something else?
I can jump in quickly, Sonia.
Yes,
I think, but I think, you know, there has been internationally a real shift in the environment, in that there's been a strong call for regulation, and I think there's increasing pressure on governments, but also on platforms to really center children and their needs and priorities and their aspirations. And you know, so I would point here to two key things. One is the evidence-based and principled guidance that's been developed by a team led by Sonia herself and the Five Rights Foundation, which is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, General Comment 25. And that is, of course, a piece of legislation, a piece of guidance that is designed to support states to understand their own responsibilities to protect children and to maximize their opportunities. And of course, not every country is a signatory to the convention, but I think the way that that piece of guidance has begun to be taken up has meant that we're beginning to see some really positive changes. And the other example that I would point to very briefly is the kind of a dedicated commissioner or regulator who deals with child online protection and child empowerment in digital spaces. In Australia, we've been very fortunate to have the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner, which is a statutory body that is charged with making sure that Australians broadly, but children and young people in particular, are safe online. But also that they have the literacies and the sort of behind the scenes lobbying that will make sure that they can maximize all that the internet has to offer. And of course, several other countries now have followed suit with establishing those kinds of roles. And I think, though, when you do that, you give the issues profile at the governmental level. That filters down into the society. You know, we begin to talk about these things because there's a government body driving an agenda and so on. So I think those are a couple of things that I think are worth exploring further.
Fantastic.
What excites me about the age appropriate design code is right there in the name of it, age appropriate. That I think so often regulation begins from thou shalt not and ignores the audience and their needs, their developmental abilities. You know, child development doesn't change; the context changes, and so if you start from the core of children's development over their different ages, then I think you're on a much better path for building something that is safe, privacy protecting, and engaging.
Yeah. If anyone else has a brilliant suggestion or initiative from their country, this is the moment to wave at me.
Okay.
Manisha, please.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that this whole attempt to get cheaper access and more access to more and more people in India, I think that is a very welcome step. Now it has to be supported by the right kind of media literacy initiatives, you know, because we already have a lot of work going on digital skills. But now we add other aspects, I think that would be really a great combination.
Yeah, and I think also safety by design initiatives where we were insisting that technologies bake in safety features into their products is very, very important. And I also think youth-led initiatives are really critical. So, and one example I would point to there is Project Rocket, who've been working with children and young people over a long period of time, as young people themselves, to develop content that is then taken into schools that really sort of resonates with the children in the age groups they're targeting. Those perspectives are really super important, and I don't often think we give children enough credit and responsibility for doing creative things to support others on.
We began this conversation thinking about the risks and that children face, and I think we've moved beautifully into a recognition also that there are creative opportunities and participatory opportunities, and much for children to learn through their digital engagement. But I see a number of questions coming in on a different kind of risk, and I wonder, I might ask Patricia to say something, which is about commercial risks, if you like, the volume of datafication, it's sometimes called, or advertising. And I know when we were working, Amanda and I, on with the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, it was very often colleagues in Latin America who were very concerned about the volume of advertising and marketing that comes to children. I don't know if that comes into your research, or if you would like to comment on whether it is a distinctive feature of the continent, or if that's not too crazy.
It hasn't come on my line of work, but for example, from our partners from Brazil, they have a very interesting model about that, because it's there is a big concern about advertising and digital media for children. Here in Chile and most Latin American countries, that's absolutely out of regulation. We don't have any laws that are actually concerned about this. And it doesn't. I haven't addressed this especially. But if we follow what we know from old research about other media and advertising, of course that we are concerned about that. Especially in those things that are not only advertising things related to consumption, to buying things, but also those things that are also related to some lifestyles, for example. Of influencers or something like that. That it's of course something that it's a bit concerning, and I think we haven't addressed that properly yet here on our research, and we hope to do that.
I would say the same here too. I mean, I'm sitting in London at the moment, and I can see lots of parental anxieties about influencers, but the research sometimes doesn't catch up with the phenomena. Caleb, what would you say in the Kenyan context? Is there children overwhelmed also with advertising and marketing, or perhaps not?
Yes, I wanted to add on a trend which is it's almost coming to become a norm in Kenya, and it's a trend about children celebs, or celebrities wanting to make their children to be part and parcel of their cast, and being able to make money out of that. It's been contested. I know a couple of parents have been asking me if it's right. And of course, some are saying it's right because sort of the kids are beginning to make money, make career, but some parents are also concerned about what about when they grow up, will they be proud of what they did? What about if they do mistake? Will they have like a safe space or spirit of resilience to be able to overcome that phase of their life? So children celebs is a growing trend, or celebrities using their kids for commercial purposes. But there's very little research, and especially coming from Kenya or from Africa, to show any evidence or any impact of that.
Those of us who are researchers here have always got our job cut out, but so too have those who are educators and governments, tech companies, and also, of course, parents. And I've got my eye on the clock, and I can see that we need to wind up very soon. So I'm going to bring this really very wonderful conversation back to parents. And I just want to kind of acknowledge some of the other questions that are coming in from the audience, which are about really what can parents, whether it's about celebrities or whether it's about keeping children in kind of safer child-only places online, or there was a question about sharenting. There are questions about the kind of data that is taken from children. You know, I can see that there are lots of really very, very live questions, and I'm going to ask each of you now in one sentence to do the impossible and just offer one takeaway to parents, and perhaps one thing that they can do or one thing that they've learned, because we hear so much sense of being overwhelmed, of kind of hopelessness. So is there something that you would like to make parents feel more that they can make something better for their child tomorrow growing up in this digital age? And well, I will start with Amanda. One sentence.
I would say that the research that we have done with children shows that they want more than anything else to be trusted by their parents, so that they can come to their parents when they have difficulties, know that their devices won't be taken away from them, and find a sympathetic ear who will help them find the support they need. Perfect.
Yes, I completely agree. I think I'm going to agree with you all. We'll see. David.
Co-play and co-viewing on every medium, from the good old television through to the metaverse, emerging metaverse platforms and Minecraft, and sit down and play along with your child. Find out what the attractions are for them.
Mm-hmm. Right, because very often fear and anxiety is bred in conditions of ignorance and just not, or just being unaware, really, and so that makes us anxious. So yes, get to know. Caleb.
I would say, yes, I would say look for a local community where you can share your experiences, and also you can learn from other parents, and let's make this global village responsible and accessible to raise our kids.
Lovely, exactly. Parents are not alone, and find those who can work with you. Yes. Patricio.
Something that is, I think, very close to what Amanda and David said. For parents, I think the message for me is like, you don't need to be a computer expert to mediate content for your children. It's a matter of being there, of being with them, to talk with them, to be more active and to get more involved, instead of only apply restrictions and norms that have proven to be not that effective as we think sometimes.
Exactly. Manisha.
Yeah, I would say that co-create the rules in an atmosphere of trust. And there are wonderful resources out there for parents. So just look for them, make your community, and use them.
Very, very nice. I hope that is encouraging and empowering. I think actually there is a common thread to what you all said, which is listen to children, because they can teach us a lot, as we have said in various ways throughout our discussion, and often they are surprising, and so we learned through surprises. So let's see what they have to say, and I think increasingly they actually appreciate parents' dilemmas. They have some sympathy for the difficult task that adults face too. So I'm going to pass back to Chris for thanks, though I do want to say thank you to everybody here and for all the many brilliant questions that have come in. But let me hand back to Chris before the hour is up.
Thank you, Sonia, Amanda, Caleb, David, Manisha, and Patricio for this vibrant and enlightening discussion and all of the work you're doing around the world to support children and families. I also want to thank all of you in our Zoom audience for joining us today. To learn more about this and other topics related to child development and digital media, check out our website at childrenandscreens.com. Follow us on these platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find all of our previous webinars covering some of the topics touched on today, including the digital divide, advertising to children, media literacy, and parenting children at different ages and developmental stages. We hope you will join us again when our Ask the Expert series resumes in February 2023. Keep an eye out for registration. Until then, all of us at Children and Screens would like to wish you and your families a wonderful holiday season and a happy new year. We hope you find joy and rest throughout the season. Thanks and be well.